We did it. 10 episodes. Look at us go, buddy. Golf clap
We,
to us.
we did it. We did it. And this will be the end of the 1867 Sports Show. Good night, everybody.
What a ride it has been. Thank you to all our viewers for tuning in there. But yeah, we lots of happenings in the world of sports there. And I mean, flurry of action. Obviously, NHL trade deadline. I've got my thoughts on our local team here, but we'll go in alphabetical order. We won't jump right to my rant. We'll kind of ease into it, but obviously, a lot of teams on the Canadian front gearing up for a deep playoff run. Others are sellers. Your Edmonton Oilers, they had themselves a bit of an eventful deadline. So figured what better way to start today's episode than by handing out some letter grades to all 7 Canadian franchises based on what they did on deadline day.
Let's do it.
All right. Wow. Calgary Flames. C. There we go. Alphabetically, they're first. So let's start off at the top. I mean, you look at what they did. Obviously, they did a lot of their heavy lifting kind of pre-trade deadline, right? Yeah, Tanev get dealt out there, Lindholm as well too. Those were some of their bigger deals that they ultimately ended up making, and those have kind of been analyzed to death at this point. People have probably seen the returns on those and have probably even seen, Lindholm suiting up for the Canucks and Kuzmenko for the Flames and all of that. So we're going to kind of focus more on the week of leading up to the trade deadline. So acquired, and of course, with my last name pronunciation dyslexia,
this is actually the part
tonight.
It's the part I'm looking forward to the most. I'm not gonna lie.
All right, so Nikita Akuttuk. Okay, honestly, for those that are watching, I do actually watch hockey. I swear to you. But if you expect me to get up there and nail every single one of these names,
that couldn't have started that couldn't have started any better than it did. Kudos to you. That's fantastic. Yeah. Anyways, continue.
There we go. So that chap from San Jose who happens to play on the blue line. Then Daniil Miramanov, also a defenseman from Vegas, and then a conditional 2025 first and third round picks coming in. Traded away conditional 2024 fifth rounder, and then Noah Hannafin obviously being that big one, which shout out to the Vegas Golden Knights here. I mean, not a Canadian franchise, but whoever they've got working their cap situation in the back room there, he's worth his weight in gold, because how they continue to do, I think someone broke it down. I think if everyone was actually playing, they're at something like $110 million payroll right now, but somehow it fits under the cap. So, kudos to the Vegas Golden Knights there.
Yeah. So as far as that trade goes, I mean, yeah, just absolute gangbusters for the Golden Knights. I don't like it as an Edmonton Oilers fan, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, anytime you can get a defenseman like that for as little as they had to give up and then still work within the confines of this loose salary cap.
Yeah.
I mean, kudos to the GM, kudos to the scouting department. And yeah, whoever is working the salary cap for the Vegas Golden Knights, you deserve a raise, you deserve a promotion, and you deserve another ring, because ultimately you're the reason why they're going to be winning again this year if they do.
Yeah, absolutely. And McCrimmon kind of went out on the offensive actually just this morning. I think he did a few press junkets there and was saying, like, listen, if you think any of these injuries are made up or anything like that, give your head a shake. You can't fake a lacerated spleen like Mark Stone has right now. And so there's definitely some truth to obviously what's going on out there. These are legitimate injuries. No one's, I think, saying that they're not playing by the rules, but I think it's very much reminiscent of the Tampa Bay Lightning, who, kind of shelved some LTIR and then, miraculous returns for the playoffs. It's jealousy that your own team isn't able to do it themselves. But I mean, overall, Calgary really did have, 3 key pieces that they were trying to move, right? In Hannafin, Tanev, and Lindholm. And they moved all 3 of them. And I think you need to give them full marks for the fact that there are some GMs out there who have a kind of laundry list of, hey, we've got to do A, B, C, and D. And then the phones start ringing and they get sidetracked and we only got through A and B. So I've given them kind of a B, right? They did what they needed to do. They're obviously not contending this year. Are they out of, the weeds instantly? Probably not. I think this is going to be not necessarily a complete teardown rebuild, but you look at what they've got to figure out. Obviously, Markstrom, their goaltender, there were some rumors that he was going to get moved pre-deadline. He even kind of came out in the media and slammed the front office about how kind of that information got released and how they handled it. So there's some bridges to be mended there, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't even be shocked if that's maybe something that in the off season, maybe Markstrom does end up getting flipped after some team that had championship aspirations fizzled out in the first round because their goaltending, crapped out on them or whatever.
Yeah. And, my letter grade, I'm going to give him a B plus because I think with the situation that Craig Conroy inherited when he took the job from Brad Treliving, I mean, you couldn't have been placed in more of a chaotic scenario with every single player that is worth anything on your team wanting out, wanting a raise, wanting to be traded. You literally couldn't have walked into a worse situation. So I think that the way that he's handled things, the way that he's gotten assets back and not lost anything for nothing, that's the main key here. He's literally turned every single thing that wanted out of Calgary into something coming back. And that's what good GMs do. So I'm going to give them a B plus. The return is not overwhelmingly, good, but it's something. So you're making the best of a bad situation. And, I got to give kudos to Craig Conroy and his staff for, kind of taking the bull by the horns and saying, you know what, we have the shit sandwich in front of us. Let's just take a bite and move forward, because the more we avoid it, the more it's gonna explode. So kudos to them.
Those exploding shit sandwiches, you got to watch out for them.
I mean, they're definitely something that you have to keep an eye out for. You got to keep your head to swivel.
Yeah, well, I can't give him the plus just for making me say Nikita Oktiuk right off the hop there. So they're sticking with a B for me.
That's why he got downgraded to a B.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because of Kyle's lack of phonetic pronunciation.
It's been a lifelong problem here. We're just airing out all of my flaws for the internet. Well, we might as well shift over to the interprovincial rivals there. Edmonton Oilers up next. And they're sitting second in the Pacific right now. Obviously, some legitimate Stanley Cup aspirations for this team. Coming in, we had Troy Stecher from Arizona, 2024 seventh rounder. Also had Adam Henrique from Anaheim, Sam Carrick from Anaheim, a 2024 seventh round pick, and then Ty Taylor from Tampa Bay. The key there being that Henrique is at 75% retained salary, 50% goes to Anaheim, and then Tampa Bay kind of came in there with the remaining 50% of that salary there. So traded away 2027 fourth round pick, 2024 first, a conditional 2025 fifth rounder, and a 2025 conditional fourth. So lots of picks going out and bodies coming in, which isn't atypical for a team that's trying to gear up for hopefully a pretty deep playoff run this spring.
Yeah, and I'll give them a letter grade and just kind of go from there. But I got to give them an A. I think Ken Holland really worked his proverbial magic at this trade deadline, because, like you had mentioned, the retention of salary is such a difficult thing to do, and the fact that you can get a third team to come in to take some of that off of your plate just by rewarding them with a fifth round pick or conditional fourth or whatever it may be. That's fantastic. That's phenomenal return. You think about it, you got 4 picks, one of which is of substance, right? That first round pick, which is going to be in the late 20s or early 30s, or let's say, God willing, it's the 32nd pick because they won the Stanley Cup this year. So ultimately, you're getting 3 guys who bring something that you don't have a lot of, which one of my favorite words in the English language, truculence. You've got guys who aren't afraid to mix it up. You got guys who aren't afraid to kill penalties, block shots, the things you need to do in the playoffs to make those deep runs, to compete with the teams like Vegas. If you watched last year, that's why Edmonton got beat. If you watched the year before, that's why Edmonton got beat by Colorado. They didn't have enough of two-way hockey with sandpaper. Now you've got some of that coming in. Adam Henrique was once one of the best two-way players in the game, and not that far removed, from it. And you look at the other guys with Carrick and Stetcher. I mean, those are guys. They're undersized, they're feisty, but they kind of solidify your fourth line and your third defense pairing, which is again 2 areas of need. The reason why I'm not bumping them up to an A+ is because I would have really liked for them to have gotten one of those secondary goalies,
Yeah.
right? To bring in and really kind of give that reassurance that if the wheels fall off with Skinner and Cousin Stu, he's been great, but if the wheels fall off, we've got that fallback. And, look, Picard's been really good this year. I got to give him, full kudos. He's been very good, but am I confident if Stuart Skinner goes down and we have to rely on him to win a playoff series? Probably not.
No.
So that's what's holding me back for an A+, but a solid A to Ken Holland and the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah. And definitely some smart acquisitions as well, too, right? Like Adam Henrique has kind of been on the trade block for a few seasons now, and especially with Anaheim's ongoing rebuild out there, it isn't a part of their long-term future. But if you look back to last season, the teams that were kicking the tires on him, at the end of the day, they were kind of hoping he would be that second line center, which at this stage of his career, I think he's a little bit past that. But to your point right there, on a championship team, two-way third line center, like this is the type of guy that is going to really earn his stripes in the playoffs, right? Blocking shots, killing penalties, doing all the little underappreciated things that ultimately get you one step closer to a championship. Is he going to go out there and lead the postseason in scoring? Absolutely not. But that's what you've got McDavid and Draisaitl on your team to do, right? So definitely great adding him. I ended up giving him a B+, and for the exact same reason that you highlighted there. There just seemed to have been a lot of goalies who probably could have been had, and it's a little bit strange that they didn't go out there to try and insulate Skinner just a bit, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, he's on a heater. He's having a great year right now, but we have seen wheels come off in the postseason before, right? We've also seen goaltenders who aren't used to being bona fide number ones and having to go out there every single night. All of a sudden, late season, even forget the playoffs, we start to see them start to break down a little bit. So
yeah,
it would have been nice to get a little bit of insulation there if I was an Oilers fan, but maybe it is just a case of, hey, the chemistry is great in the room right now. Do we really want to disrupt that by maybe bringing in someone who knows, maybe was a starter on a crappy team and won't be quite as happy, even though he's got a chance at adding a Stanley Cup ring to his jewelry collection, that he wouldn't enjoy that sort of second fiddle behind Skinner. So it could be a little bit of locker room chemistry at play there. But at the end of the day, if we're just looking at it from an on paper standpoint, yeah, I 100% agree. Another proven goaltender probably would have been nice if you were an Oilers fan.
Yeah, I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury would be wishful thinking, but that was kind of the hope that all Oilers fans had was, you know what, that's a perfect opportunity to maybe bring a guy like him in who might be okay playing second fiddle to a guy like Stuart Skinner. But again, can't be disappointed with it. They went out and did some masterful things. They stayed within the cap, and yeah, all's good in Oilland right now.
Yeah, big smile on your face there. Eh? Going over to Montreal, we've got Arnaud Durando coming in from New Jersey. Conditional 2025 third. We got Jacob Perreault from Anaheim. And then going out the other way, Nathan Laguerre, Jake Allen, and Jan Mysak. Again, not a whole lot of trades there, but they're really a team that is probably going to make a lot of their moves in the off season, right? They're so far out of the playoffs that there's no need to force something that isn't materializing, or someone's, not blowing your doors open with a great offer that you like. You can afford to say no. I'm giving them, however, a C, just because like it was the most bland and stereotypical Montreal Canadiens trade deadline you could have. Because what did they go out and do? They moved around some middling assets and brought in not one, but two French Canadians, both from Montreal as well, too. Like, just in a vacuum, if you had have asked me before the season had started, that would have been on my bingo board,
Yeah.
B1 top left corner right there. So I mean, none of it really moved the needle forward for them as an organization that much. But you look at someone like Jake Allen, who got moved out kind of for a pittance. Jake Allen, could he have been a nice little fit in Edmonton right there? So just another example of, there were definitely some goaltenders who could have been had at not very steep of a price tag. So that kind of ties into my point of our friends out west there. Can't quite get to an A there for him.
Yeah. I'm right there with you with Montreal. A C is pretty much, I think, what everybody can give them. It's yeah. Out of every team in the league, I think they probably had the most boring lead up to the trade deadline and then the most boring trade deadline. So we can move on. A C across the board. And yeah, let's see what they do in the offseason in the draft.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing you can kind of point to that, hey, minor win is Perot 2020. He was a first rounder. They traded him for Isaac 2020 second rounder. So they moved up in the draft as of 4 years ago. Great. Like that's about it. We don't need to deep dive them too much because yeah, wasn't a very eventful
No.
trade deadline. But if you're following along alphabetically, you know who's coming up right now.
I'm just gonna go make some popcorn, get
Yeah.
myself a beer, and just sit back and enjoy the show.
You know what? You might as well go start a 5-course meal because I could pretty much go on a big rant here. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, I'm giving them a wildly incomplete grade here. Only one trade ended up getting made. Obviously, Vladimir Tarasenko goes out to the Florida Panthers for a pittance coming back, right? You've got a conditional fourth rounder and then a 2025 third, which, if you look at the return on players who are not a Stanley Cup champion, not a top six forward, not someone who is still producing at a fairly high level. I mean, I don't know what more you can really say other than Steve Stais. This was his first trade deadline as a GM, and it really showed that way too, right? Like I get the argument if you want to sit there and try and say they didn't want to force any deals, right? Stais, obviously, it's his first deadline day. I think he kind of used the trade deadline as a bit of a feeling out process for the league. And some of those names that you heard getting floated out there, oh, is Batherson going to get moved? Is Chikrin going to get moved? Right? What's going to happen with these core players? Are they going to do something drastic to really shake up some of those guys that aren't just on expiring contracts, but are even signed to term and long term deals here? And that ultimately didn't materialize. But I think Stais has a pretty good idea now based on the phone calls he did get, because by any stretch of the imagination, regardless of where you're getting your news from, people were saying that there was genuine interest in a lot of those players, right? But I think you now have to take the mentality that the Ottawa Senators are going to need to do a ton of heavy lifting this off season. By not making moves at the trade deadline, you've kind of painted yourself into a bit of a corner here that drastic change is going to have to happen either leading up to the draft, right? Or we're going to need to make some deals in the summer, because we're quickly now approaching the paralysis by analysis stage with this ownership group, right? Like, even putting aside the roster for a minute, who's the coach next year?
Yeah.
Right? Is Stais still going to be the GM, or is he just keeping that seat warm and they're going to hire someone in the offseason? What's happening about the arena? Like, is it going to be at LeBreton? Is it going to be somewhere else downtown? Like, there's so many major questions around this franchise that have nothing to even do with the roster, but it's just encapsulating the fact that this seems to be a team that's just frozen in time at the moment. And there's no clear blueprint of how to get out of it. By and large, like, we have to admit that Staos's group, they're kind of undoing a lot of the damage that Dorian kind of did on the way out, right? When you're
Mm-hmm.
losing draft picks because you didn't fax over the fine print in contracts, and some
Yeah.
of these, trading out of consecutive top 12 draft picks in the first round. Like, there's a lot of things that went into all of that. But, just like we got off a 5-year championship kind of grace period rant about Masai in the last episode, you've now had kind of your feeling out process, right? And we've heard the cliches of they want to be best in class. They want to do right by the players. And, by the sounds of it, hey, Tarasenko's family was in Florida. He's got a no trade clause, which again, thanks for that, Dorian, on your way out. Like why that was included, who knows? But so you can kind of make the argument, well, they had him over a bit of a barrel. Well, it happened right before the day of the trade deadline. Like, could you not have tried to make him sweat it out a little bit to have gotten a bit more of a return there? Like, so all in all, you've had your year now. If you think you are going to run back this roster without any kind of major shakeups or changes, you're doing a huge disservice to every single paying fan who has supported this team through broken promise after, unparalleled success. And, we're going to spend in this year and all, like the never ending rebuild. You could even make the argument that they're further away from the playoffs this year than they were last year. So we're actually regressing at this point. So, all right, Masai, you had your 5-year grace period. Now it's time to do stuff. Deos and Lauer, you've had your 1 year figure out the franchise. Who do you like? Who do you want to move on from? Big change this summer. Otherwise, I don't know what more to say. You're officially fair game to be fully criticized as being incompetent moving forward now that you've had a full year.
Wow.
Thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, well, one, I just want to say kudos to you for keeping it as tame as you did. I thought when you texted me and said, I'm going to go on a rant, just be prepared, that we were going to see red face, we were going to see froth at the mouth, and you were going to go for the jugular. And I think you kept it very tame, which again, I'm very impressed. I thought that
well, I'm a more mature individual now.
Well, be that as it may, I'm not going to be as nice as you just were, because I think that with all things being considered, you have to give this team a failing grade for how they handled the trade deadline. Because like you just mentioned, the only trade they made was so underwhelming in the return that it really just put such a bad taste in people's mouths. And then they didn't do anything else after that.
Yeah.
So I get you're trying to undo things of the past. I get that you're trying to feel out the NHL and get your bearings while you're doing all these things. But at the end of the day, it's not like Steve Staios is the only hockey person in that room. It's not like he didn't inherit people who were involved in that scouting staff, involved in that management group prior to him getting there. So you should have a pulse on what you're walking into, regardless of how long you've been there or not, right? So the fact that you still got these albatross contracts weighing down your team, the fact that you've got a lot of these guys who are they going to be here next year or not? Are they going to be part of the future or not? And you're not getting anything back for them. Like we just talked about Calgary. Did they get a great return? No. But what has Craig Conroy done? He understood his assignment and said, I need to dig ourselves out of this hole. And if I were to compare Calgary and Ottawa right now, Calgary's probably closer to getting back on track to where they want to get to. Whereas Ottawa, like you just mentioned, yes, they have a lot of young, talented pieces. Yes, they have, this rebuild that they've been starting for the last 7-8 years. But ultimately, like you just said, they're further away from making the playoffs than they were, I would even say 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is not something that you can just say, oh, well, you know what? We'll deal with it tomorrow. Like, no, the building is on fire. You need to put out the fire. And the only way to do that is to, again, rip off the Band-Aid and say, we can't be wearing kid gloves anymore. We can't have the owners meddling and everything excuse anymore. This is something that this new group needs to live up to their best-in-class expectation and their best-in-class promises, which I think they will do eventually. But this was the time to really put your stamp on the team and ultimately gain a lot of favor with the fan base. Because if you went out and made a few moves, even if it's a mediocre return coming back, I think fans would be more willing to accept that given the circumstances. So I'll leave it at that. I'll give them a failing grade for the way they handled this, and let's hope that they have a plan for the offseason. And like you were mentioning, they're doing the heavy lifting when it comes to free agency and the draft, because this was definitely disappointing for sure.
Yeah, and I think that some of the comments that they've made as well too have kind of rubbed a lot of fans the wrong way as well, as far as, hey, we're trying to do right by the player here, and Steo saying that unequivocally there was no better deal out there. It's like, okay, well, yeah, and, obviously we're not in the rooms here, but when you say that, but you also didn't take it to the absolute deadline, are you sure that there wasn't, right? Like
Yeah,
that's what a veteran GM would have done. Maybe there wasn't a better deal, and maybe
maybe.
ultimately that's what it
Yeah,
was. But just optics wise, why did you have to pull the trigger, a little bit earlier than maybe you really needed to? Maybe you make them sweat it out, and suddenly that conditional fourth turns into a pair of thirds or something. I
yeah,
don't know. But, doing right by the player, doing right by the GM who you let hang around for too long, doing right by the coach who you ultimately canned, right? Like, okay, there's a point of doing due diligence and trying to be, an amicable employer. But guess what? The Ottawa Senators and, any NHL or sports franchise shouldn't be viewed as this kumbaya, like, oh, let's go. And they've got ping pong tables in the waiting room. And like, it's a place, you called it like it was last week. It's a cutthroat environment in professional
yeah,
sports. And it's way too lovey dovey kids' gloves, right? Like, it just feels like they're the Mickey Mouse version of a professional sports franchise right now. Now, you can flip that narrative on its head and be like, listen, we took a year, we evaluated everything, and here is our plan.
yeah,
But it can't just be shuffling the deck chairs around there, to borrow one of your sayings. It's got to be sweeping change. Like, a core piece needs to get moved, a big signing needs to get made, something needs to happen to shake up this roster beyond just, you know, cliches and preaching patience, because this has been a very patient fan base, because we're now talking on almost a decade of missing the playoffs at this point.
yeah. And last thing for me on this, I mean, you're 100% right in your evaluation of it, and I think we can go back to when we talked with Steve Warren, and obviously him being a Sens fan and a Sens follower much longer than you and I, and you can hear the frustration in his voice
Mhm.
when he even talks about anything regarding the Senators, not any, not a particular subject, just anything.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the majority of people who have been with this franchise through thick and thin, is they're just getting tired of the same thing over and over and over again since the 90s.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, you're either going to do your job or you're going to be liked.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. So, yeah, like you were on the one side of Masai needs to, put his big boy pants on and kind of put relationships aside. I'm going to say the same thing. Like, if you're part of the Ottawa front office, if you're part of the Ottawa ownership, I mean, you guys obviously have done extremely well for yourselves to this point because you are where you are. How did you get there? You can't, you can't make decisions that are going to be, good for everyone. You can't make decisions that are going to make friends. These are decisions that are tough. They're decisions that strong-willed people make.
Mhm.
And this is the perfect time for these strong decisions to be made, because this is what this franchise needs, and needs in a desperate way.
Yeah. And now that we've spent as much time on the Ottawa Senators as we have all other teams combined, let's move on over to Toronto here. So, obviously, the Leafs, they're sitting third in the Atlantic right now. They're comfortably in the playoffs. Bit of a boring deadline for them as well, too. You look at the pieces that they brought in: Connor Dewar from Minnesota, Cade Weber from Carolina, Joel Edmondson from Washington, and kind of very similar to Edmonton, a lot of picks going out, right? So a
Yeah.
2026 fourth rounder, 2026 sixth rounder, 2024 third, 2025 fifth, and Dmitry Ovchinnikov. I'm assuming I said
Oh,
that
well
right.
done. Well done.
Yeah. but
You totally redeemed
and
yourself.
totally redeemed yourself. So overall, what were your thoughts on the Leafs deadline day or lack thereof deals on deadline day?
Yeah, I'm gonna give them the same grade that I gave Montreal. I'm gonna give them a C because, at the end of the day, I think a lot was expected out of Toronto's management to really, reassure Leafs fans that this was not going to be the same story over again, right?
Mhm.
Yes, they went out and made a deal, what is it, a week before the trade deadline, bringing in a defenseman. He gets hurt, the first game that he's playing for them.
By your boy.
Yeah, by Mr. Rempe. But, you know, you look at why Toronto has struggled. You look at why Toronto has not had the playoff success. And it's the same reason why the Edmonton Oilers did not have playoff success the first few years that Connor McDavid was there.
Mhm.
It's because they lose the physical battles. Yes, you can win the one game scenarios. Yes, you might win, the two games you have at home. These are 7 game series. And these series weigh on you. And if you don't have the bodies that are throwing, missiles back, and you're just kind of on the defensive the whole time, you're not going to last. And I mean, I think that's kind of what they tried to address in the offseason by bringing in Domi, Bertuzzi. That's the type of style that they wanted to play. Now they're kind of falling back into that same category of, well, Matthews is scoring at an unbelievable clip. Marner is playing out of his mind right now. Nylander's had a great season. But where's the secondary scoring? Where's the secondary, jam that they need to really jolt the team, really give the fan base something? And I'm not even touching on the biggest issue for them, which is obviously in the net.
Mhm.
Because ask any Toronto fan, are you guys comfortable with your goaltending situation leading into the playoffs right now?
Yeah.
And if you tell me yes, you are a great liar
Yeah.
because I'll guarantee you that none of you are. So this was a perfect situation for them with you mentioned all the goalies being available. You don't have to go and hit the home run and get, the Allmark from Boston to come in and be your, already locked and loaded number one. You can go out and get a Markstrom from Calgary, get a Jake Allen from Montreal, get a Marc-Andre Fleury from Minnesota, and not have to give up the farm.
Mhm.
So I think Toronto missed the boat on doing something really big that they could have, really used and utilized well in the playoffs. So did they make moves? Yes. Did they address some needs? Yes. Is it anything worth writing home about? Absolutely not. So a solid, maybe unsolid C for the Maple Leafs.
Yeah. And again, it's yeah, I think Leafs fans have seen this story kind of play out as far as look at the last couple Kyle Dubas years there, where kind of took
Mm,
some swings at the trade deadline, ultimately didn't pan out, and
yeah.
maybe chasing some of those grizzled veterans for a quick sample size in Toronto, they ultimately don't re-sign, and now you kind of see the fruits of that bearing out where you look at their upcoming draft picks and they are few and far between
Yep.
in the upcoming drafts. So the cupboard's pretty bare there. So I was always entering this trade deadline kind of knowing that they weren't going to make a ton of big acquisitions, but to go out there and Dewar Weber and Edmondson, right, for a team that is really trying to shake that, hey, we'll make the playoffs and bow out in the first round. Oh, we finally made it to the second round. Okay, but did any of them really move the needle? I would argue no. Like I don't see them being any better today than they were pre-deadline, right? And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I flip back and forth between C minus and D plus. I'm gonna go with D plus just because this is a team who is publicly professing to be chasing a Stanley Cup here, and it's not just happy with being also rans and hey, we made the playoffs. Let's see if we can get on a heater. Like we're now entering multiple years of all right, it's time to take this thing on a very very deep run and I don't think any of those 3 really addressed anything there. And
No.
Samsonov, Wall, like, Martin Jones, like, it's been kind of a Band-Aid and duct tape solution in nets of late. And we've already said it. There were some options out there. You didn't need to go out there. No, and not that Boston would ever even trade, Linus Ullmark in the division to the team that's chasing them in the standings. So it's not like he was ever a realistic option, but there were some other names that were out there that they could have gone after. And, I think there's some salary cap implications there for sure. But one name that's been floated out time and time again, and here comes another trade deadline, and he's still out there, is John Gibson of the
Yep.
Anaheim Ducks, who listen, so if you're going to pull up his stats in recent years and be like, well, why would they want him? Have you sat down and watched an Anaheim Ducks game within the last 2 seasons? Like, it's a
Yeah.
firing range out there.
Yeah. It's
So
not good.
yeah, you could put Vasilevsky or Shesterkin or whoever you want in between the pipes there, and they're probably posting very similar numbers. You
Yeah.
put John Gibson on a solid defensive team in front of him, and I think suddenly you're going to realize, like, oh, hey, yeah, this was the guy that
It's
was
pretty
leading the
good.
Ducks to the postseason multiple
Yeah.
years there. So yeah, it's a little bit disappointing that that's kind of what they added, but you want to talk about parallels. Edmonton and Toronto seem to be on, very similar paths right now, where looks like they're probably going to go about as far as, Draisaitl and McDavid can take them out west, and Matthews and Marner can take them out east. And if their scoring dries up, could be some tough sledding there. If I had to give an advantage to one of them, I'd probably rather be Edmonton at this point, because I think they're a little bit deeper top to bottom. But again, this is kind of the price you pay when you're handing out those, 12+ million-dollar contracts to these players that, once Nylander and Matthews full contracts really start kicking in, it's going to even get worse for Toronto. So
Yeah.
this is not a huge issue right now, but you would have liked to have seen them add a little bit more depth, because I don't know how much longer they're going to be able to keep these core groups of players together, because someone's going to have to go out of there. Maybe it's Tavares or something like that gets
Yeah.
moved just to free up some space, but it'll be interesting to see. They seem to be just running back pretty similar lineup to what they did last time.
Yeah. As you're saying that, the only thing I'm picturing in my mind, and this is the best comparison I could make to this situation, the small market teams in the NHL are Frank Grimes, and the Toronto Maple Leafs are Homer Simpson. Homer is totally oblivious to everything that he's got at his disposal. And Frank Grimes is just so jealous of everything. It's like, this is my son Bart. He has a factory downtown. And, and then Grimes is losing his marbles saying, "You're having lobster for dinner." And that's kind of what it feels like. Honestly, it's like a real life Simpsons moment where Toronto's just kind of oblivious to all the great things that they have at their disposal, and all these other teams are like, just give us one of those things and we'll make it work. Like, how are you guys not doing it? So
you're worth $4 billion. We're playing out of Arizona State University's home rink.
Yeah. So to the Frank Grimes of the NHL, stay strong, Arizona.
Oh man. Well, we got two more teams to rattle through here, and they're both sitting atop the Western Conference standings there. Winnipeg second in the Central, Vancouver first in the Pacific. Vancouver's going to be a pretty quick one to go through, because they really didn't do a whole heck of a lot, right? Again, that Lindholm deal was kind of leading up to the trade deadline. They kicked the tires on a few. One really interesting sort of pop-up that happened leading up to the wee hours of the trade deadline was the fact that they were then suddenly considering flipping Lindholm
Yeah.
after 5 games or whatever it was, in exchange for Jake Gensel out of Pittsburgh. Ultimately, he ends up going to Carolina. Cooler heads prevailed, but that would have been an all-timer as far as, here's this blockbuster deal. Thanks for your services. One of those like in memoriam montages.
Yeah.
Like, Lindholm's 3 weeks out on the West Coast. Cool.
Vancouver Canuck great, Elias Lindholm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that would have really shaken up the draft. That would have shaken up the trade deadline for sure, because obviously you don't see that happen very often. Would it have suited the Canucks to make that move? Absolutely, because I think Jake Gensel's a better player. And I think that he actually serves a better purpose because, like we mentioned when we talked about Vancouver a few weeks back, they're very top heavy.
Yeah.
So if you can kind of spread out that scoring a little bit by bringing someone in like a Jake Gensel, I think that makes all the sense in the world. But hey, when you're first in your conference, when you're first in your division, you really don't have to make as many moves because you're not in as much of a panic.
Yeah.
So I get that the Canucks, they made their move leading in. They can kind of kick their feet up, and if something came to them, hey, we'll explore it.
Yeah.
But we've already done our due diligence. We've done what we had to do. Let's just kind of sit back and run with the roster that's got us here because obviously there's some good chemistry in that room, and they're playing very, very good hockey. So, I'll give them a C plus because look, sometimes no news is good news. And I think in their case, no news is good news.
Yeah. I'm going to give him a B minus. And, I think the one little stone that they probably did their homework on, but I think maybe even selfishly, I would have liked them to have seen was apparently Phil Kessel was very close to just signing a contract with them. Right. And he probably would have come in at the absolute league minimum, would have had pretty much zero cap implications for him there. And what harm would it really have done? This is a guy who has won.
I think it would have done a lot of harm to Phil's lungs and heart,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. But
so I think that was like the major thing that held it back was once that conditioning test went through, okay, maybe Phil's not going to go too well with this roster. But anyways, continue.
Well, was Phil ever in a peak specimen of male physicality at any point in his career there? But really, I mean, you kind of mentioned it, very top heavy. We're not talking about expecting this guy to go out there and skate for 20 minutes a night and
True.
be on the second line and on the power play and this and that. Like, go out there in 10 minutes a night and maybe he gets some depth scoring for him. But I don't know. Again, did they need it? Absolutely not. But would it have been kind of a nice to have or an exploratory thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it would have been a fun little subplot there. Get Phil the Thrill back out there and on the ice. But I mean, Winnipeg Jets, two acquisitions here. Colin Miller coming over from New Jersey in one deal, and then in a separate deal, also with New Jersey, because they decided to just circle back, I guess.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? Tyler Toffoli coming over. So not a whole heck of a lot going out to acquire either one of them. 2026 fourth rounder, and then a 2024 third and a 2025 second round pick. Again, look at Winnipeg doing better than the Senators front office there for Tarasenko. Crazy. But thoughts on your beloved Winnipeg Jets?
To be perfectly honest with you, I love the Tyler Toffoli trade.
Yeah.
I think that's just such an under the radar move that good teams will go out and make, that it's not going to raise a lot of eyebrows when it initially happens, but that's such a sneaky move because Tyler Toffoli is a bulldog. Everywhere he's gone, he's scored, right? When he was with the LA Kings, he was one of the best players to watch on the ice come playoff time. Yeah. He's an absolute must have for any type of playoff contender. So I think just with that trade alone, I'm going to give Winnipeg an A minus because they went out and actually did something that improved their team without giving up anything in the grand scheme of things. So Colin Miller, nice little depth defenseman that can come in and, give you some seventh man, minutes and step in if someone gets hurt. But yeah, I think Tyler Toffoli, that's a move that could really come back and pay huge dividends for Winnipeg down the stretch.
Yeah. And I like the fact too that, he's going to a situation that's probably not even going to feel all that unfamiliar with him because he's spent time with Sean Monahan. He's spent time with Alex Iafallo, right? So you can almost make a line of the fact that all former teammates and have some built-in chemistry. So I think he's an acquisition that's probably going to hit the ground running out there. And I bring it up just because there's been a ton of talk, and we've even talked about it as well too on this show, as far as players who are afraid to go and play in Canadian markets because A, the pressure, and B, right, all the tax implications, and hey, I don't have to pay any state income tax in Florida. Why would I go up there to Toronto and get sued by the CRA there, like our friend Mr. Tavares? But Tyler Toffoli has now played for multiple Canadian
Yeah.
franchises throughout his career. So, you know what? Let's give a little golf clap to Toffoli for not shying away from the brighter lights here north of the border when it comes to NHL hockey.
And throw in the fact that he's also played in the Ottawa market with junior with the Ottawa 67. So he's made his way through quite a few cities in this country. But yeah, I mean, it's great to see. It's great to see that not only is the player willing to go and make a team better, because some guys are very hesitant to go, like we mentioned Tarasenko. He's not going anywhere besides Tampa Bay or Florida, right?
Yeah.
Those are the two that he ultimately wanted to go to. Tyler Toffoli, I think, was there is like, look, I just want to win, man. If there's a trade to be made where it gets me in a situation where I can do that, let's do it. So you love players like that. You love, the teams that take chances on players like that. So this is such a good fit between what the Jets are and what Tyler Toffoli brings.
Yeah. Well, hey, you factor in his minor hockey days. He's 2 away from the Canadian bingo. He just needs Toronto and Edmonton, and then,
Yeah.
then he's all set. So everywhere
Yeah.
else he's already been. So shout out to our friend Tyler Toffoli. But
Yeah.
moving on from the NHL trade deadline, we're going to switch over to the gridiron for a little bit here because
Yeah.
obviously we just wrapped up NFL Combine, which means the CFL Combine is now in season, and all sorts of physical fitness testing and all of that stuff going on. And as someone who has actually been through not one but two combines yourself, there
Yeah.
figured it's a good time to dive deep into the process there and see what it really is like going through that process, getting ready for a CFL draft.
Sure. And, just touching on kind of what the 2024 CFL Combine looks like. So the landscape of this whole thing has shifted so drastically since I went through it. But so everything's happening the week of March 18th to March 24th. And essentially, you're going to go through the same full gambit of things that you see at the NFL draft. You have your interviews, you've got your physicals, you've got your medicals, you've got, team by team meetings. And then you got the on-field stuff. So, but the thing that really, separates the CFL combines from the NFL combines is you actually have one-on-one, drills where you're playing against other players from across the country. So you have pads on, so they get to see you with your pads, going through, receivers are running routes against DBs, offensive linemen are blocking defensive linemen, quarterbacks are making their reads and throwing the ball, running backs are having to pick up a blitz from a linebacker at depth. That's really the cool thing about the CFL Combine that kind of separates it from everything else. But now you look at what they have. So they've got invitational combines, which are regional. So that means that they've got more opportunities for young players, young prospects to go represent their schools at these particular regional combines. If they are selected at the end of that testing to move forward, they actually will join the already selected group at the CFL Combine, which is held in Toronto. And along with that, with the new CFL 2.0 initiative that was brought in a few years ago, there's actually now an international combine that accompanies this, and the top players from that combine are invited to participate amongst everyone else at the showcase. So it's really kind of a full encompassing event, and it went from just being one day to a full week, which is great. You love to see the growth of the game. You love to see all these players getting the chance to represent themselves, get recognized, and ultimately live their dream. Because again, this is kind of dating me a little bit, but back in my day when I was in the draft, there were only 6 rounds. Now they've got 10 rounds, and they've got an extra team.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about all the extra opportunities that are there, and like it's just so good. So kind of painting a picture, because we talked about a little bit last week with the Canadian prospects at the NFL Combine, but what it looks like from when you get invited, how you get invited to the time that you finish. So ultimately, you're going to be submitted by your coaching staff to represent your team at the Combine. You have to be a certain age, or you have to be in a certain year of eligibility. So it used to be you could either go in your 4th year, or you could defer to your 5th year. Now it's your 4th year no matter what. You could always go back to school. So if you make that first cut, you get submitted by your program, you get put in a pool of prospects. What happens then is the CFL teams will go through the list of prospects and say, okay, we want, 7, 8 linemen, right? We want 3 quarterbacks. We want 5 running backs. They'll kind of put all that together, and then they'll pick their players according to it. If you mentioned shuffling deck chairs around, it's kind of the beautiful mind writing everything on the board to make it fit, right? So typically you're going to have 50 prospects, 40 to 50 prospects that are selected. Now, on top of that, if you aren't selected for the combine, there still are options because, like I said, right now they've got regional combines, which are, great because it gives, kids opportunities. But just from my own experience, there used to be 2 combines, one in Toronto, and then there was a secondary combine that was held at Laval University in Quebec City. So I personally went to the one in Quebec City. A few of my teammates went to the one in Toronto. Again, same type of deal, but this is kind of, where things get interesting because people don't understand kind of behind the curtain, right, of what happens at a combine.
So you're going to be the Wizard of Oz right now. You're pay no attention to the man behind the curtain while we're peeking back there.
Nobody sees the prospects. Not nobody, not know how.
Yeah.
Man, we're just full of great one-liners tonight. I love it. But yeah, so essentially, you arrive, at whatever venue that you're at. Usually it's first thing in the morning. You check in, you're giving your kit for the day. So that way you're assigned a specific number that you have to wear. You're identified by a number because in case someone can't see your name or doesn't know who's up, they can look down. Okay, number 57. Number 57's on my sheet. Okay, it's Kirkwood from University of Ottawa. So the way that it works is you all get kind of funneled into one room, like a herd of cattle. Okay. You are then put through your physical. So they check to see that all your ligaments are intact in your knees and your elbows, and there's no pre-existing injuries that you won't be able to perform at the highest level. If you do, then you could say, look, I hurt my shoulder second last week of the season. I'm not going to do bench press today. I'm not going to run because I pulled my hamstring training, whatever it may be. Those are the things that you see. A lot of guys will skip out on something because they're legitimately hurt. Some guys will skip out on something because they didn't train well enough for it, or they're just not going to perform well in that particular drill. So you have to sign up for whatever you're going to participate in for that day. So you're in this room with every other prospect there. You're kind of sizing everybody up. You're kind of schmoozing with, the scouts that are there. They're coming to, pull you aside saying, hey, you're so-and-so from this school. Hey, I just wanted to get a visual of what you look like in person. Blah, blah, blah. And they'll ask you all these questions. You got hurt second week. You rolled your ankle. How's that feeling today? It's really the most stressful job interview you've ever had. Because it's like going to a job fair, but everyone's just kind of chucking grenades in the middle of the room. So once you finish all your paperwork and you're getting distracted, pulled left, right, and center, you go and hand in your paperwork to the front desk again and say, okay, I'm participating in every event. I'm going to be open to meet with every team. I have pre-existing conditions that I need to, clarify before I step on the field today. Here's who my agent is. Here's who my coach. If I don't have an agent, here's who you can call for my references. The whole thing. So once that's all done, they'll now take you by position and they'll say, okay, all the offensive linemen over here, all the defensive linemen over there. Once they have you kind of in your groups, they'll line you up again. And now you'll have to go take your shirt off, kind of stand there in your shorts, and they want to get a look at you to see what you look like physically, right?
So somewhere out there is a Kyle Kirkwood, Tom Brady in his underwear style combine photo floating around if we do enough deep diving on the internet, is there?
I mean, God help the person that still has that, but maybe. But anyways, you're walking around, you're kind of showing them, how long your wingspan is, how big your hand is. Like they're taking all these measurements.
I'm literally just picturing you walking around. Hey,
yeah,
look at this,
everybody. Yeah,
hey,
look
check this out.
Yeah. But yeah, they're walking around with rulers. They're measuring, from pinky to your thumb. They're taking your wingspan as you're walking around because they want to see if you've been in the gym training. They want to see if, you're physically fit, right?
Yeah.
Once that's all done, all right, let's go get measured. So now they
And
take
they
your weight.
say only women get physically objectified there.
Oh my
They've
God.
clearly not been through a CFL
No,
combine.
they've clearly not been through a pro football combine for sure. So then you go, you get your height and weight taken. So this is a big thing because you have to put what your height and weight is on that sign-in sheet.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't correspond with what they're getting with their measurements, well, now you're going to get put through the ringer.
Yeah.
Why are you lying about your height? Why are you lying about your weight? Why is this happening? Why is that so far off? So you're like, on pins and needles, just kind of saying, all right, well, I hope that I'm in the ballpark because I weighed myself yesterday and maybe I didn't drink enough today or whatever it may be. But yeah, so it's very stressful. So now that's all done. That takes about 2 hours. Okay.
Fun little morning.
Fun little morning for you. Once that's all done, all right, everybody, we're going to head out to the field area. So that way now we can do our testing and then do our on-field stuff afterwards. Well, I don't know if you've ever been to a gym, like a Good Life Fitness.
What kind of an insult is that?
I'm not saying you.
All right,
particular.
Kyle. I don't know if you've ever seen the inside of what we call a gymnasium.
Listen, it was a rhetorical statement. It wasn't meant for you to take offense to, nor was it meant for anyone else to read too much into. But if you have been to a gym, you know that there's a lot of people working out at different places, so that way they're not really focused on you particular, right? Well, when you are going out to work out, so you've got bench press, you've got 40-yard dash, you've got a shuttle, you've got a vertical, and then you've got your on-field stuff. And your 3-cone, you got your on-field stuff. Everybody is watching you while you are doing these things. And I will tell you, the most stressful part of that whole thing is bench press because you feel every single eyeball in that gym on you. On the field, all the players are peering over it, to see what this guy's going to lift, to see, that guy plays my position, I got to outlift him. And then you've got the balcony up top, which is not only the coaches, GMs, everything, but there's also, just random people up there. So because it's at Laval University, these are all members of the Laval football program who aren't part of the combine, but are basically whooping it up for their guys. And it's crickets when it's just you. Right. So when I went through, I had separated my shoulder and ripped the actual labrum off the bone in training camp. But I played through the whole season, just, flinged it up, get some painkillers and off you go. But I said, you know what? I came here to work out. I'm going to see what I can throw up on the bench just with one arm because I'm not going to be able to lift anything with my left. So anyways, I don't even remember how many I got up, probably like 50, which, for an offensive lineman is not good. But, that being said, every rep was right. So it's like I'm doing 15 reps with one arm. So, but I just remember that being so stressful. And some guys were psyching themselves out so much because you're comparing yourself to every other person there. And it's if someone does 30 reps, it's like, I can't do 30 reps. I'm going to look like absolute shit. I made a mistake by saying I'm going to lift today. I should, hey guys, I don't want to lift anymore, But then you go from that, you go to your 40. Everybody lines up in single file according to your number. All right, now running number 57, offensive line, Ottawa U. You've got a big scoreboard up at the top that basically has your name, your credentials, and then it'll time you so you can see how fast you're going as you're running. Right? So you want to talk about, I really hope that all the numbers that I was getting in my pre-combine workouts are accurate. This is that time that you want to do that. So you see Xavier Worthy when he got that 4.22 and he ran out of the gym, like that's that moment, right? So anyways, but then you go and you do your verticals, you do everything else, but everything is just like everybody's watching you. It's not, there's because the NFL Combine, everything's spread out, everything's by day. CFL Combine, everybody's together. Mm-hmm. You're all doing it. Now, once you're either riding high from testing well, or you're down in the dumps because you tested like absolute shit. No, now it's the on-field stuff. So let's get our pads on and go do what we came here to do. So what happens is they'll select you and they'll say, okay, we want you to line up there, you to line up there, and then we're going to line up the defensive line here. Okay. Because it's strategic. They want to see you block specific players. Mm-hmm. Everybody gets 2 reps. Okay. Once your 2 reps are done, those might be the only 2 reps that you get for the entire day if you don't do well. So you're literally praying that you have the best 2 reps of your life on those first 2. Because if you get 2 reps and they work out well, after that, it's all right. We want to see 57 against 42. We want to see 57 playing center. We want to see you against 91. At one point, I had 12 straight reps. Everyone is looking at me doing these reps, and I could just sense the rest of the linemen are saying, like, why the hell is this guy getting all the reps, right? And I'm dying. I have no energy left because we just finished doing this full workout. Now we're doing the on-field stuff. And luckily, I was just so dialed in that it worked out so well for me. But I could just imagine what it was like on the other side, because I've been in that scenario too, where it's like the first rep you have is terrible. I was a terrible practice player. Not to say that I was lucky that I had good reps, but it just like, the adrenaline takes over and you kind of go through that. But yeah, sometimes 2 reps, that's all. And then it's like, oh yeah, sir, by the way, my name's so-and-so. And like the coaches are looking at you like, yeah, I know. And they'll walk away. Right. So, that's the really, really in a nutshell, kind of how the start of the combine selection process goes to, where you end up, being in the end. But yeah, I mean, to anyone who's going through the combine, to anyone who's gone through a combine, I mean, it's something you'll always remember because it's so different from every other, part of football or whatever sport you're playing that you'll ever go through. So, yeah, to everyone who's going through it this year, I mean, good luck to all you guys. Just trust everything that you've done up to this point. And yeah, just, as a poet once said, don't fuck it up.
Yeah. and now that that's done, time for my story of my experiences through the CFL Combine as an offensive lineman, because I have hit the gym so often.
I don't know if you've been to a gym or not.
Yeah, don't know if you. Hey, what's a game? Did want to actually, on that note, obviously the one of those steps has now taken place. 2024 Invitational Combine has gone through, and there was a DB by the name of Jackson Sombach out of Regina, who last week we were talking about some Canadians showing out and really rising their stock. Now, Jackson is fairly undersized, even by DB standards there. His official measurement there is 5'8.5". So definitely relying on his speed. Luckily for him, he put together quite a showing. He actually, out of all athletes, finished first in vertical jump, first in 40-yard dash, first in 3-cone, fifth in broad jump, and fifth in shuttle. So quick golf clap to our friend Jackson from Regina, because probably had he had one of those off days, probably wouldn't be amongst those in consideration getting moved on to that next level there. So just goes to show, right? Like 4-year career could be over with a couple of bad reps at that next level.
Yeah. And I mean, and there's a lot that goes into it too. Like, hey, maybe your girlfriend breaks up with you right before you go to the combine, right? And like your emotional status is not good. Maybe a family member passes away. There's so many external things that go into your peak performance that you really don't consider, right? It's emotional stuff, but that, has a heavy burden. Maybe you're not sleeping very well. So yeah, I mean, anyone who does well, you obviously feel so good for them because they've trained that, so much for that moment. But like, to the guys who, don't do as well as they would hope, or don't do as well as people are expecting, like there's nothing to be ashamed about for going out and trying, right? Like, I don't care what people say. The fact that you're able and willing to go out and do all that in the middle of this, most stressful environment imaginable and compete, hey, I'll go and ride with those guys 10 times out of 10 when it comes to building a football team. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, you can look at a lot of guys who didn't perform well, but again, the main thing is how does your film look in a game situation?
Yeah.
Can you play football? You're not getting, we call it the underwear Olympics. You're not getting drafted for winning the underwear Olympics, right? It'll help, but that's not going to make or break your stock. So, I'd seen somewhere the other day, like Orlando Brown Jr., who's, made tens of millions of dollars in the NFL. He had the worst combine performance in history. Ran a 5.940, 14 reps on the bench, like a 19-inch vertical. And look, but let's go look at the tape. The guy's 6'8", 340 pounds. He can play.
Yeah.
Blocked for Baker Mayfield for 2 years. Now, one of the highest paid tackles in the game. So, for every story you hear about someone didn't perform well and they lost out on their chance, well, sometimes if you have good enough 4 years under your belt, that's enough to get you by with a bad workout for sure.
Yeah, they'll find you for sure, and
Yeah.
we're starting to see that mentality trickle down a little bit, not only at the NFL level but at the CFL level as well too, right? Like there's fast and then there's football fast.
Yeah.
The two of them don't need to be mutually exclusive anymore.
No. And yeah, but again, like I said, the combines is it's a fun, stressful, eventful, anxious, everything that you can describe type of environment. And until you've actually gone through one, you can't really understand what it takes to kind of go through it. So, last thing is, like you mentioned, and this is something that I had talked to you about before, but before you had mentioned that I went to 2 combines, and that's accurate. So they no longer have it, but before, what used to happen was anyone who was deemed a free agent past their draft year, they also had a free agent combine where you can go and try and get back on teams' radars. And I will say it's not as formal, not as stressful, and it was a lot of fun. I had a lot more fun at that one than I did during my draft year. But yeah, that was when I was kind of a broken down player at that time. I was just coming off of my knee reconstruction, and was just kind of going out there to see if I could still do it, which my body told me I could not. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I was able to go through with a bunch of my buddies, and yeah, we just had a really good time with it. But yeah, unfortunately, they don't do that anymore. But yeah, always fond memories looking back on the combine circuits and kind of training and leading up to everything. And yeah, like I said before, wish all the players the best that are attending this year's combine for sure.
Absolutely. Well, before we sign off here, wanted to quickly touch on the fact that 2 pieces of hardware got handed out this past weekend. So the first gold medal U Sports Championship in Laval Rouge and Or history for the men's basketball program, and on a local level here in Ottawa, now back-to-back women's national champions, the Carleton Ravens. So Laval and Carleton, big round of applause
Yes,
to you guys and
absolutely.
girls out there. Some really, really high level basketball getting played, and especially with Laval coming in as a underseeded team,
Underdog, yeah.
upsetting everyone the whole way through. So
Yeah.
very, very
You
well
love
done on that front.
Absolutely. You love to see that.